So welcome everyone. This is another one of our webinar interviews that we do with interesting people about interesting topics that are happening in the world of HR and people at work. This one I'm really interested in. We're going to explore today what really makes us tick at work as human beings. And we're going to dive into the psychology effectively behind employee contentment. And so without further ado, it really gives me great pleasure to introduce Gethin Nadin. Gethin, who is very well known in the circuit, is a psychologist and fellow at the RSA. He is a very frequent speaker, and he's also a published author on employee engagement and well-being. And luckily for us at Silver Cloud, he has also worked in the HR tech space for the last 20 years or so. Gethin also works with Benefix as their Director of Employee Wellbeing, and Benefix provide an employee reward and recognition platform. And Gethin is really central in ensuring that the technology that they develop and that they provide to their clients really does follow the best practices when it comes to effectively employee recognition and employee well-being, which obviously includes a lot of the psychology aspects that we're going to hopefully talk about today. Gethin is also a fellow Star Wars and Lego fan, so I might make a bit of a reference to that later. Now, just before we start, Gethin, I think we've agreed before, because we've talked about this a little bit, that the term employee well-being is a little bit overused in the marketplace, and we're probably guilty of that, and so is every other vendor and consultancy within the HR space. And I guess it's a term that's really overused at the moment, because obviously employee engagement, employee well-being is something that's really come to the head, based on our changing working conditions. So I kind of felt that it lost a little bit of its power a little. And so what I want to do is kind of re-explore, as I said before, what employee well-being looks like, but behind that true sort of human psychology, and just really what does, generally keep us happy and keep us ticking over and productive at work. And a massive subject, and we've spoken on similar roundtables before where we've talked about this. So, these interviews are designed to be quite short, so we'll try and do as much as we can in a 25-minute interview. So welcome, Gethin.
Well, thank you very much. I feel like I should have been sat in my home office with all my Star Wars toys behind me, yeah, rather than in the living room. Maybe we'll do that for the next one if there is a next one.
No problem. I've seen your collection, Gethin. I believe you.
So I think HR loves a trend, right? Every year there'll be multiple reports issued around the world that kind of say, these are the top 5 things HR directors are thinking about. These are the top 5 HR trends, top 5 HR trends. That kind of, I think, has driven the idea that when we talk about engagement, when we talk about well-being, when we talk about the employee experience, it fuels the idea that these are fads that kind of come and go. And the reality is we talk about the employee experience now, but the employee experience has always existed. We might have a name, we might be able to kind of think about it a little bit more and have it more structured in our minds around what the employee experience is. But we've always had an experience at work for as long as there's been a workplace and as long as there's been employees. And employee experience kind of came along and almost replaced engagement as a kind of measure of people being at work and feeling great about work. But employee engagement is still a thing. I see employee engagement as the psychological output of a great experience at work. So if you think about, we all have customer experiences, the physical experience of buying from a shop online or going into a physical shop and buying that product, that is an experience similar to the employee experience. But the way we feel when we've got the product, the way we're treated by the person at the desk, the way their checkout process works online, that's all part of the experience as well. And then the output of that is kind of increased customer loyalty, more brand loyalty, kind of we feel great about using that brand's products. We'd like to buy from that shop. And it's no different at work. We have these micro experiences that run from the day we find out about a company to the day we interview with them, our first day, right the way through to our retirement or the day that we leave. And the psychological output of that is engagement. So when we are doing a job that we like with people that we like, when we are feeling challenged, when we have purpose and belonging, all of that stuff adds up to well-being. And so actually engagement ends up being a pretty good way of measuring employee well-being in the workplace. And so all these names that your listeners would have come across, all these trends still exist, and they've kind of always been there, but sometimes kind of galvanizing those by kind of what do we mean by experience, engagement, and well-being, I think can help us think about how do we design that experience at work and how do we measure engagement for our people when they're at work.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. So you're drawing it back to like what we're like in everyday life as consumers, that we like to go and shop at particular stores, or we like to shop online, and actually what we want, the end product is the product. But I guess effectively it is that whole end-to-end engagement with that experience, because we all know that psychologically when we buy something we feel good about it, or we enjoy the process of researching a particular product and enjoy the interaction, whether that's online or in a store, that we might have with that retailer. And I guess that's the same that organizations are trying to do. Is, they've got their shop window in terms of what they're trying to give to the employer, and also it's the experience of actually attracting them and then onboarding them, and then obviously keeping them a loyal client, because that means that they will stay and be productive with the organization.
Yeah, and in an online shopping example, I think there are great parallels between the customer experience and the employee experience. They're different things, but they operate in almost the same way. You think about somebody like Amazon and how much money, millions and millions of dollars every year into how do I get you from wanting something to buying it as quickly as possible and with the least amount of friction as possible. Because they know that small frustrations along that journey, that customer journey, will result in you deciding to go and look elsewhere. So we know actually from online shopping that if your web page or your app takes about 30 seconds longer to load than you expected it to, the chances of you just giving up and going somewhere else to buy a product is pretty high. And so again, we are just not used to that. We don't have the patience for that. So Amazon do things like one-click ordering and next-day delivery. So they make it as easy as possible for you to buy from them rather than anyone else. And if you think about the experiences people have at work, I genuinely feel like we're at this point now where if my experience isn't enjoyable at work, if it's frustrating, if there's too much friction, I just don't want to work with you. I either don't want to go and work with you or I want to quit. And I think that's fascinating when you think about HR technology, because I think the process of booking a holiday, of looking at your documents online, recording your sick day, finding the support you need, all of that has got to be easy, because modern life, we just don't have the propensity to trawl through documents and ask lots of people. We want answers quickly. We want to be able to book time off whilst we're not in the workplace. You want to be sat at home saying it's going to be sunny tomorrow. Should we go to the beach? Yeah, I'll book the day off. We're getting to that point now where I think, soon enough, people will be able to ask Alexa to book the day off or something like that for them, and it all gets sorted. And that's the kind of consumer experience I think that we're starting to see in the workplace as well.
Yeah, it's all about non-friction, isn't it? It's making it as frictionless experience as to anything else that you may be doing on your phone, and having that within the same work experience. So that's really interesting. So let's just move to the sort of technology, the recognition technology that Benefix provide, and because I'm quite interested to hear about, we're both sort of HR techies, so we like talking about this stuff, and we like trying to tie it back to, okay, we think we understand how to engage with employees, but how do we actually take that thinking and put it into the development of the platform? So if you take Benefix's platform, which is, really about making people feel good about themselves based on other employees giving them recognition, what are the thought processes around that?
So if I go back a few years, when I first wrote my book, I was really frustrated with all the very big stories we were hearing from Google, Microsoft, Apple, all those big companies doing all these great progressive things to make a great culture for their employees. And when you really strip back some of those modern ideas, you start to realize that actually the way that some of these big modern companies operate, it's the same way that people have always wanted them to operate for hundreds of years. And some cultures around the world have treated people the same way. I can give you quotes from thought leaders back in the 1800s that you think somebody like Steve Jobs would have said 10 years ago. And so the idea of what we want from work and the part work plays in our lives and how we feel kind of good, hasn't really changed. You can go back to the tribe and fire of what it's like to be a human and see lots of the same characteristics about what we want from the workplace. And it's, as I mentioned before, kind of purpose and belonging. We want to feel included. Employees want to have a voice. We want to feel like we take part. We play a part in the big organization. And one of those very core things we want in life, inside and outside of work, is recognition. We want to feel like we are doing a good job. Our CEO at Benefix always says nobody wants to go to work and do a bad job. We really believe that everybody wants to be proud of the work they do. They want to get a good job, and they want to be noticed and recognized for doing so. And so when we built a recognition platform, it was built on the idea of, actually, this is kind of a core human need. Expressing gratitude is kind of key to our survival, because if you think what it was like to be kind of cavemen running around killing dinosaurs, I know they both didn't exist at the same time, but that kind of
I get the analogy.
Yeah, I get that. We needed other people for our survival. We literally needed people to have our backs. So we needed to be able to trust. We needed to have that reciprocity around trusting each other and kind of thanking each other. And that hasn't changed. In 2021, we still need that connection with people around us. We know from some of the largest studies into workplace success that psychological safety is one of the key things to get to a successful performing team. And so we took all of that stuff and we built a recognition platform that was designed primarily around peer-to-peer recognition, so that the people you work with can say thank you to you on a regular basis. And we use all sorts of stuff in the background, like sentiment analysis, to then start to work out, how is that making you feel when you get thanked? And some of the surprising things that I've seen using the product myself as an employee at Benefix is, it doesn't matter how senior you are in the business, you still need recognition. You still need somebody to say you've done a good job, and that was a great day. Thanks for doing that. But also, I've started to see that because we link it to our values, I'm starting to see, what am I getting thanked for most, and what do people most value me for in the company? And so what I've been able to see at Benefix is people learn from me more than anything else. And so I really kind of cemented my position as this kind of expert within our business, as somebody that people can go to and ask questions and get ideas. And so that's really actually helped my engagement, because it's given me my purpose, and I can physically see the impact I'm having on other people and the environment in which I work with, as well as all the good stuff that comes from just being recognized. And we, over the last year and a half, have been physically removed from the workplace. Many of us have, and physically removed away from those small moments of positivity and interaction we have with other people. And we can replace some of that with technology, so we can still get the lift of those casual positive encounters with the people we work with every day through technology.
And I think what you've sort of looked at there, or drawn upon there, is that cycle between you're getting something from the recognition from a personal psychology level, for want of a better word. It might perk your day up. Based on that basic need that you talked about as human beings, but also, I guess, from a performance based, is that I didn't think about the analytics, but if you think about the analytics, you can then collectively be able to say to your look at your workforce and go, well, we've got these people who are great at this. They're getting rewarded specifically for this. So we know they're good at it and they're adding value. So that's driving performance. But also, I guess it's maybe, and I'm not sure, it's probably not in your case, but for some employers that might go, well, actually, that's actually determined my career path with these guys, because I actually thought I was good here, but I'm getting rewarded or thanked over here. And actually, I'm going to do more of that if I'm allowed to, potentially. And I suppose all these collective insights do then allow an organization to align it to individual performance, how that's then, contributing to not just really the company bottom line, but more about the objectives that those companies are trying to achieve. And it may even result in someone doing something a bit different.
Yeah, there is an awful lot of evidence around the impact that recognition has, not just on the individual, but the team or department in which they work in, and organizational success. And that is so strong that I can say with complete confidence that one of the 5 things that every single one of us should be doing in our personal lives, and every organization should be doing, is recognizing the people that we work and live and love and play with and spend time with. More than we do. We know that gratitude is such an important part of how we view life, that gratitude journals get prescribed by doctors. When you're struggling with your mental health, people are being encouraged to kind of make a note of what worked that day. Stop thinking of really big stuff like houses and cars and holidays and marriage, and start thinking about, I got given a free ice cream today. I saw a nice little puppy on the way to work, and that person really just bought me a coffee, and it just lifted me out of a bit of a dark mood that morning. And that's a lesson for life there, right? There's a huge amount of evidence that actually we need to express more gratitude to the things we have in our lives and the people we have in our lives. And when we do express more gratitude, we know that altruism makes us feel better. We know helping people makes us feel better. Donating money to charity makes us feel better about ourselves. So it's not just about creating high-performing teams. It's about creating better well-being for yourself and better psychological well-being for yourself. And then when all those things come together, what you start to have are teams that collaborate more in the workplace, that volunteer for tasks more, that work closer together, that innovate more, that show more creativity, and surprisingly deliver better customer service, develop better products. And that creates a much more sustainable, progressive organization that creates more profit and purpose as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this leads me on to one of the final questions that I had, which is it's something we've touched on, but it is the $1 million question. And this subject isn't new, bearing in mind what we've all had to go through in the last 18 months, is that, how do you think that the pandemic has changed this kind of notion of well-being, and how do you think employers expectations of their organizations or of their employees has changed? And I think I was on a round table recently, and I think you might have been on it, Gethin, but an HR director said, and I appreciate technology isn't a magic bullet, as you've mentioned. It's something that can help, but how do we create a culture at the moment remotely that is as good as grabbing a sandwich with your colleague in your lunch break, where you literally have those water cooler moments? And I guess, as I mentioned before we started this session, we actually had an in-person team meeting yesterday at SilverCloud, which was, we were so excited because I hadn't personally met a lot of these colleagues, but what we actually were talking about is it's so hard to actually make sure that people are okay, because someone might be having a bad time at home, and you don't pick that up on a Zoom call, but you might pick it up if you're on the other side of the desk of them. It's those little nuances. And so, again, what are employees trying to do in your experience? And also, what do employees expect now?
So I don't think the pandemic changed anything. I think it accelerated changes that were always well on their way. So, hybrid working might be new to lots of people. Home working and remote working might be new to lots of people. But for millions, it was always happening. So, a third of corporate America that could work at home was working at home at least one day a week before the pandemic hit. And so we knew that for lots of people, working remotely has been part of their regular daily life for quite a long time. I've worked remotely for 12 years. And so I think for those organizations that are worried about culture, it's new to you, it's not new to other people. So there are plenty of examples of people that have done this very, very well for many, many years that we can learn from. And I don't think it's a case of, people will be removed from the physical workplace, but you look casually at almost every study into kind of what people's preferences are. It's a hybrid, right? So most people don't want to work exclusively at home or exclusively in the office. Most people want to work a few days at home, a few days in the office. And so they get that kind of that serotonin boost from spending time with their colleagues. They have the opportunity to collaborate and share ideas for the time they're in the office. And what that means is the workplace becomes a source of things you can't get at home. And so you're right, you can't have that connection in the same way when you're working from home than you do in the office. So the office becomes, or the workplace becomes, about collaboration and working together. It becomes about socializing and building some of those collections. But when you layer technology onto hybrid working, technology might not be great at establishing relationships, but it's very good at maintaining them. So days you go to the office and spend time with people can be enhanced through technology like recognition. At Benefix, we've got people who started at the start of the pandemic who I feel like I've got a strong emotional connection to, but I've never met. They've got no idea I'm 6'4", that I will meet them for the first time soon. I'm bowled over by how tall I am, probably. And so but I have built an emotional connection with those people. And it's a really weird analogy, but I don't really see it as any different to things like online dating, right? You could speak to somebody online, you could share photos, you could start having video chats, and you've built an emotional connection with that person before you met them. Now, that's not sustainable in itself for a long period of time, but we've shown over the last year that for a period of time, you can use technology to further those relationships or build those relationships. And the future is going to be a hybrid mix of actually using technology and in person to kind of create that culture. And it's also getting people to that point where, culture doesn't have to be about a place. Culture is what it feels like to work at this organization. And there are many, many successful examples of companies that don't have any offices whatsoever and still maintain a really, really positive, engaging culture.
It's really interesting, actually, and we've been talking about doing this for a while. But we recently, Silver Cloud recently did a roundtable event of ourselves where, and this came up where a massive financial organization that you may not assume is quite as tuned into the cultural side as you would think. We asked them this question about how are they adapting, and one of the things that I thought was really interesting was they said, well, working to this level, working from home was a 5-year plan of ours anyway, pre-pandemic. It's now suddenly a 1.5 years plan. And so we're actually rushing through what we were going to do. So going back to what you said, it's just, the pandemic has accelerated thinking just a bit quicker. And then we started to talk about, well, how does that work geographically with your employees? Like, you're a very London-centric organization. So have you had any discussions about people that did get London waiting because they're no longer going in, and therefore they're not, should they get the extra London waiting money? And they said, well, no, that our office is a collaboration, so people will come in now to, as you say, Gethin, get that fix, get that collaboration. We're not forcing them at any particular time, but obviously we need to be able to monitor it. And as far as London's waiting's concerned, well, no, because they've got to, they're paying for potentially their internet, their electricity, so that they should have that as a benefit. We're not going to take that away. And I thought, well, what a brilliant way of thinking about it, because obviously I've felt the benefits of working from home, and as I say, you've been doing it for a while, and as long as you can do it in a blended way, you are saving money, and I suppose in some ways you're being more efficient. I go running with some friends in the running club, and a lot of them have said, yeah, I'm now going back into the office, but I'm doing it 1 day a week. I'm tying that in with my team so that we're all in the office together, and then we're going for a beer afterwards. So actually we're still doing the same thing, but it's just more organized. So, people are finding their way around it.
And, a great employee experience and a real commitment to employee well-being has always been about choice. We are so diverse as individuals. Some of us have got kids and wives. Some of us live in very small houses. Some of us live on our own in a 1-bedroom apartment. Some of us live in big houses with a garden with a large extended family. So the needs that we've got and our ability to work at home or in the office, massively different. So even down to kind of some of the socioeconomic factors, some even down to race factors. You're more likely to not have access to an outside space in this country if you're a Black employee. So people's diversity plays a big part, and I think the pandemic has certainly highlighted some of those inequalities in how people can work. But given them the choice so that they can work life and they work together and integrate those two big parts of their world has always been really, really important. So that choice has been about flexibility around when and where I work, and the time at which I work. And so, we've had flexible working and the legal right to request flexible working for a few years in this country. Most people have the ability to work some degree of flexibility. We've now added onto that flexibility around location. And bear in mind, there are huge benefits, not just to the organization, but to the world for this happening. We saw a significant drop in CO2 emissions right around the world. We saw waters in Italy kind of clean out. We saw air quality improve in cities around the world. And we also saw that people move some of that spending away from city centres and to the towns and villages that they live in, rather than their kind of commuter towns. And so all of a sudden you start to see that injection in the local economy, which gets reinvested into through the local council, through schools, through healthcare. And so I think what we'll start to see is this boom of people living kind of smaller lives, I guess, where they kind of live and work at home in the towns and villages in which they work. And the cities have to provide something new. And where city centre locations will be, those offices, I think, will be really focused on things that we can't get at home, as I mentioned before.
Mm, mm,
And so I think, when we really think about well-being, giving people that choice around flexibility is really where it's at. So if you live in a small one-bedroom flat in London and actually you can't work at home, but your commute is pretty expensive and a season ticket is pretty expensive, what is the compromise there? Can I come into the office for at least a few days of the week and still save some money on my commute? So that way my financial well-being improves, but also my mental health, because I don't get caught up in the rat race 5 days a week. And I think what we all need to understand as well is it's easy for me to say this stuff because I've been doing it for 12 years, but I found my rhythm after a point in time, right? So there'll be people living in flats with their partner where one person's in the bedroom, one person's in the living room. The next flat they move to, or the next property they move to, they will start to think about, okay, where are you going to work from, or where am I going to work from? So our lives will slowly start to adjust to home working. And secondary to that, what we've experienced for the last year and a half has not been home working. It's been home working during a pandemic, whilst your kids are at home, whilst everyone's stressed, whilst anxiety, while people are worried about the economy, people are worried about their health. You strip all of that out. If we just sent everyone home in a normal year, everybody would have probably loved working to some degree at home, because it meant that get up in the morning and bake some bread before they take the kids to school. They can go for a walk in the park at lunchtime. They can finish at 5 o'clock, and suddenly the father or the mother can see the kids before they go to bed for a few hours. That's what real working from home is like. And pandemic aside, that's what we'll start to experience, hopefully, towards the end of this year and into next year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's interesting what you said. It's just about redistribution of wealth, collective wealth. And instead of it all going into one area, it's being distributed potentially more evenly locally. And I do think that's interesting about, and I think it was mentioned on on a roundtable that I was on, is about, once you've come out of the fog of any disaster, whether that's a pandemic, a war, God forbid, a terrorist attack or anything, but actually you come out with different, more evolved ways of working. And I think this is a case where, obviously the pandemic is a horrible thing, and it's all affected us in different ways, and some more than others. But actually coming out of it, once the dust settles, there has to be some good progressive initiatives or behavior as a result.
Yeah, and that employee well-being, you mentioned it before, has been an output of that. This the silver lining in this cloud, if I can use that pun for silver cloud, but the silver lining in this cloud is that we've taken well-being more seriously. As soon as the pandemic hit, I would have people phoning me up and saying, that well-being stuff you were talking about 2 years ago, we really need to do it now. And those companies that had a commitment to well-being, that already had a strategy in place, weathered this storm better than others. And what that meant is that through this very desperate time, they maintained their employee engagement. Employees rallied around and said, I want to work with you, and I want to help you survive this, and I want to work with you to get through it. Yet we saw lots of companies where employees kind of said, do you know what? I'm not happy with the way you're dealing with this. I'm not happy with the way you're treating me. Casually, I've read about 25 studies globally that say on average about 50% of people say they're going to leave their jobs as soon as the pandemic ends. And the reasons why are because they've either reflected on what's important to them, and they've decided that employer is no longer giving them what's important to them. I think in many cases that will be things like flexibility, but in many cases it's, you didn't look after me. I really needed you when you were not there for me. So why am I going to give my life up to a company just for a salary when there's a company over here that's saying, look, when your life hits the rocks, I'm going to be there for you, whether that's a divorce or death of a loved one or debt problems. I want to be there for you and help you. I'm going to go and work with that company that cares for you, because if they're going to look after me at my worst, they deserve me at my best. And I think that change in employee expectation is going to come as a big surprise to lots of employers, because before the pandemic hit, we had 40-year highs employment in the UK and the US. The expectation is, and these figures are telling us, we're going to get back to that. Recruiting is already now back at pre-pandemic levels. If you want to try and hire a developer, good luck. Developers are very difficult to find at the moment. I saw on Twitter the other day that somebody told me The company told all the developers, right, we're going back to the office, and you're all coming back to the office full time. Didn't give them the option of working from home, and overnight they lost 10% of their developers. So 10% of the developers up to walk down and said, you know what, this is not the life I want to live, and I'm going to go and work with somebody else. And so as soon as the pandemic recides, there's going to be a buyer's market for employees. So the employee value proposition, the deal you give employees, is now going to be measured not just by pay and benefits, the opportunities you're giving me, what's the flexibility, what's the autonomy and trust you're giving me. And if you aren't giving people that, you're not going to get the best people.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think when in the early stages of the pandemic, it was interesting how LinkedIn, in my experience, moved from being less corporate to actually quite a kind place. It was individuals like me going, we're working from home and we're with the kids and we're baking cakes and it's fine, and companies were saying, look, this is what we're doing to try and help our community or our employees. And I thought, if you were a company that was trying to almost be commercial in those first couple of months, you were kind of not being listened to rightly, because it turned into sort of like you say, a recognition and empathy channel, which I think is really good. And as I say, we've had companies that we work with who are introducing new technology and have said, how we've supported our employees, whether we've done it rightly or wrongly, but how we've done it and what we've learned that's how that will dictate our external brand now, and our internal brand. We are now being judged by our employees, who may or may not leave, on how we try to support them, even if we didn't get it right, but what we did get right. I think that's really interesting.
Well, 2 years ago, I predicted that the traditional stakeholders would change. I think if you looked at research from 5 years ago, the primary stakeholder was always going to be the investor or the customer. And I was convinced that that was going to become the employee, that the buying power of the employee was going to become so strong. And let's bear in mind that, most businesses are nothing without the people they've got working with them. And most businesses survived the pandemic because of their people. They survived because of how adaptable people were. So when you said, right, we're working from home overnight, they completely changed. They completely changed their working patterns. They worked harder. They remained engaged. They continued to deliver services. A computer couldn't do that. AI couldn't do that. We couldn't retrain AI as quick as we retrain people to work in a different way. And so I think we started to revalue the human nature of our jobs. And then as consumers as well, we started to realize that actually, who am I going to spend money with and why? Why am I giving money to some of these companies that were not treating their employees well? And throughout the pandemic, there were headline news where brands weren't looking after their employees. In the US, you had consumers demanding that brands started to pay sick pay for those people that were self-isolating. And when there was a revolt in the paper, and loads of brands went back on that and said, okay, we will pay people sick pay. And so the data that came out of the pandemic showed us that consumers now have the way you treat your employees as a buying criteria. 94% of the largest 600 investors in the US said they now want to see evidence of how you treat your people before they give you investment, because they now know that a successful business treats its people well. And you now have shareholders saying, you've got to treat your people well, you've got to look after them. I don't want you to give me my money yet until you've reinvested it into the business, because I know I'll get more out, because the more that people looked after, the more engaged they are, the higher the productivity, the bigger the shareholder returns. It's a huge change in how we value employees. And it will be criminal if we forget that and we go back to the old ways. The pandemic has given us a new way of working, and I think we need to stick with that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's almost like how I sort of think about it is 2 years ago, you almost had that false and forced well-being initiative, which was we might not have a great culture and people might not be that happy, but we're doing lots of free lunches and we're having free massages and we're doing lots of nights out, and it's all that kind of stuff. And actually it's now turned around to sort of just genuine well-being, isn't it? What can we do where we're not throwing things at people, but actually how can we give them some well-being just by changing our mindset?
Well, we know from our benefits platform, Benefix has got a benefits platform as part of its offering. And we know that as soon as the pandemic hit right around the world, people turned to their benefits platform. All the data tells us that, I need help with my well-being. I'm struggling for the first time, perhaps with my mental health. Where do I go for help? I'm going to go to this place where I know there's traditionally been some health benefits. And most employees are saying they were disappointed with what they found. And the research says something like 75% of employees say that they've had enough of gimmicks like massages in the office because they realize that that's not actually well-being. What they needed was, I'm going through this really anxious time. I'm having to homeschool kids and balance work. I'm living with my partner 24/7. This is all too much for me. I need somebody to support. And what we also saw as well was right across the board, around a 20% increase in old, stale, not very sexy benefits like income protection and life insurance, because people started to realize when the pandemic hit, damn, my life is finite. And if I caught that and I died, what would happen to my family and how would the mortgage get paid? If I was long-term sick away from work, how would I keep that income? If I was furloughed or I saw a drop in income or I lost my job, how would I maintain the lifestyle that I've got and look after myself and my family? So people turn to these old kind of stale, not very fun benefits that actually they've kind of reimagined
the
now
value. Yeah.
Use valuable products, exactly. And so what we're now starting to see is this kind of benefits renaissance where actually employees are now saying, do you know what, benefits are really important to me, and we've seen the reasons why, and I want you to spend more money on benefits and think more about delivering the benefits that I want to see, not these benefits that are quite gimmicky and visual for you as an organization to say, like, look, I've got mindfulness app and I can kind of help you with your mental health by giving you a mindfulness app, when employees are saying, well, just don't overwork me in the first place and give me and let me have an opinion and let me know what your expectations are and recognize me, because that's all the stuff that affects our well-being at work, rather than just saying to somebody, actually, you feel a bit of shit because of the way we've treated you, and we're going to give you something that you can kind of self-diagnose rather than actually fix the problems that we might have caused.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, Gethin, I'm going to have to draw a line under this because we like to try and keep these relatively short. It's a topic that I could talk to you about all day. It's so interesting. But thank you so much for your time and for your insights. We really do appreciate it. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching this one back. So thanks very much, Gethin.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yes.